Okay, this is Children of Arcana, Chapter 2. Content warning for drinking and some crass language. Okay, here we go. Marissa never returned to the ship. For the rest of the journey, Alexander was on edge, constantly watching for her, expecting her to appear and share more of his secrets. Not when he was working so diligently to rebuild his life. His heart pounded a little faster every time he caught a glimpse of black hair. He felt as though he were being followed down the hallway when he was alone, and he couldn't stand being up on the deck. And Dimitri was not helping. So, when are you going to tell me about your magic? He'd asked over lunch one day, to which Alexander had hastily replied, "If I ever learn how, I'll tell you." Of course, that wasn't enough. Why Dimitri believed that dark-haired woman over Alexander, he couldn't tell. Regardless of the reason, Alexander was fed up with it. By the end of their sea journey, Dimitri had asked him about it close to 20 times. Now, as Varia was dimly visible through the misty air on the horizon, Alexander was plotting ways to separate himself from Dimitri as quickly as possible. He cast a glance at the loud man, who was standing beside him on the deck, staring out across the ocean, with a hand perched over his eyes to shield them from the thin streams of sunlight peeking through the clouds. Dimitri had urged him to come up here once land had been spotted, and since everyone else was rushing to the deck as well, Alexander had complied. "What a journey," Dimitri commented, smirking down at Alexander. "And we finally made it, huh, kid?" Alexander had long since given up on getting Dimitri to stop calling him kid. "Just wait. I'll show you all the best places. Where to find jobs, where to find drinks, where to find girls." He gave Alexander a nudge with his elbow. "We'll find you some girls you can impress with your magic." Alexander sidestepped, unable to make it any more clear on his expression just how irritated he was with Dimitri. No, he wasn't interested in finding girls, or impressing them, or showing anyone any magic. A job? Sure, but then he was getting that job and leaving Dimitri behind. For the last time. "You don't have any magic?" "Sure, kid." Dimitri's weasel-like grin was back. "But when it finally comes out, I want to be there to see it." Dimitri wouldn't be there to see it, that much Alexander was sure. He turned his head away from the nosy man, saying nothing else to him. He'd learned by now that the best way to deal with Dimitri was to ignore him. His gaze fell on the slowly approaching capital city of Varia. He could just make out some of the taller buildings perched on the edge near the port, and he could just barely see some movement that he recognized as people traversing the docks. A tiny tremor of uncertainty escaped him on a breath. Would he be able to make it here on his own? He recalled some of the useful advice Dimitri had given him. Most of the blonde-haired man's advice pertained to finding the best taverns, but there were bits and pieces of it that Alexander had decided to store away for later. One of these particular pieces stood out to him, now as he perused the shoreline. All of the fancy buildings in the capital are owned by the rich politicians. It may look impressive, but the rich make up a very small percentage of the people living there. Most people who live in the capital struggle to find and keep their jobs. Some don't even have homes. So if you're looking for a good job to keep, you might need to travel further than the capital. Dimitri had then insisted that Alexander at least spend a few nights with him in the capital, but Alexander had quickly declined. He needed to be out on his own as soon as possible, and if that meant leaving the capital behind, so be it. His gaze traveled along the horizon, wondering if there were any other large cities along the coast he could go to. Trees crowded the shoreline as far as he could see, but Alexander knew Varia was a massive continent. There had to be other coast towns out there somewhere. As the ship neared the port, Alexander's legs began to feel restless. He was ready to be back on dry land, able to move freely wherever he wanted. Dimitri jumped down from where he was perched on the base of the deck's railing, picking up a case he was using to carry his belongings. He strode for the ship's exit, the portion that would connect with a ramp on the port. The other passengers were heading that way too, toting their various packs and cases with them. "Come on," Dimitri beckoned him. "You don't want to be the last one on board, do you?" Alexander shoved his hands into the pockets of his coat, checking one last time to make sure everything was there. Then, on unsteady feet, he followed Dimitri around to the side of the ship. As the anchor was cast into the water and ropes were tied onto the docks to keep the large sea vessel from floating away, Alexander felt a twinge of excitement. He couldn't keep the spring out of his step as he pushed his way through the crowd, heading down the ramp towards solid ground. Dmitri trailed behind him, for once struggling to catch up. "Slow down, kid," Dmitri called after him. "You don't even know where you're going." Alexander rolled his eyes, but he knew Dmitri was right. He had no idea where to go first, and unfortunately, if he wanted a guide, Dmitri was his only option. Slowing his stride, he waited for Dmitri to catch up to him. Dmitri, of course, stepped right past Alexander, eager to take the lead. "This way," Dmitri shot over his shoulder. "We have to go through regulations first. Border check and all. You probably know the drill." He'd never been to another country before, but Valehearth had strict border checks in between regions, so Alexander decided he probably did, as Dmitri put it, know the drill. He ran his thumb over the metal Mapleton token he'd moved to his front pocket. Would that mean anything here? Or would the Varian officers take one look at the Zavala token and send him on the next trip out of here? Dmitri led him along the docks, weaving in between fish vendors and seamen in a sporadic pattern Alexander knew wasn't necessary. Above them, a black stone wall bordered the capital, and a heavily guarded gate marked the only entrance from the seaport. He could already see a long line of sea travelers waiting to be granted access into the city, and as he and Dmitri finally reached the back of the line, Alexander withdrew his token, hoping Dmitri would be able to answer his question. "Hey, Dmitri?" Dmitri turned his head, seemingly surprised that Alexander had actually addressed him by name for once. "Yeah? Will this token get me inside the gate? Or will I need one from Varia?" As Alexander asked his question, he felt a little foolish. There were people on his ship from several different countries, even some from Valehearth. Of course, those people wouldn't have a Varian token. Still, he wanted to know before he was caught unprepared at the gate. Dmitri snorted. "Put that away, kid. You Vala people are so obsessed with your tokens." "You don't have one?" "I have one. A token that looks just the same as any other Varian token." Dmitri raised an eyebrow. "That way, if someone steals it off of me, they can't find my house and steal my belongings." "It doesn't say where your house is," Alexander mumbled. He was beginning to wish he hadn't asked. Dmitri waved a hand at him. "Don't worry about it, kid. You'll get your precious token at the gate. Just tell the guards that you want to live here, and they'll get you one." Alexander almost laughed. "No paperwork?" "Why would they need paperwork? They don't care about you once you're inside the gate, unless you do something wrong. Then you have to fill out some paperwork, and everyone knows you're a terrible person. So don't be stupid, and you'll never have to fill out paperwork again." "Well," Alexander pressed, still awestruck by how different Varia's government was compared to Valehearth's. This was the kind of information Dmitri should have been telling him on the ship, instead of where to find women and ale. "What if I want to buy a house?" Dmitri snorted again. "Believe me, you have a long way to go before you can afford a house. For now, you'll be living in the common dwellings with all the other travelers. Of course, the offer to stay with me for a few nights still stands, but my lovely lady mate probably won't appreciate you sticking around for too long." Alexander wrinkled his nose. He could only assume what a lovely lady mate was, but he knew he wasn't interested in staying with Dmitri and a woman overnight. If that meant he stayed in these common dwellings, so be it. The line leading up to the gate was advancing at an agonizingly slow pace. Alexander craned his neck to see above the other people, wondering what was taking so long. "Is it always this busy?" He decided a change in subject was in order. "It is when I travel," Dmitri replied. "I go visit my sister in Zorvan every summer, during traveling season. And a lot of people travel to and from the capital, so yeah, it's pretty busy. Most of these people are travelers returning home, like me. And then there are the people traveling to Varia, like you. Did you know you can tell them apart just by looking at them?" Alexander knew Dmitri was telling him this in order to prove his superior knowledge, or something ridiculous like that, but this information might be useful. He wasn't exactly interested in learning who was or wasn't from Varia, but if he knew how to tell them apart, he might be able to blend in. "How can you tell?" "Well, first of all, it's incredibly rare for a native Varian to have black hair. Anyone who looks at you might think you are Zorvanite, with hair as dark as yours. Although, if they got close enough to see your blue eyes, they'd know immediately that you weren't." Dmitri pondered this for a moment, getting uncomfortably close to Alexander's face as he studied his eyes. "Actually, now that I think about it, black hair and blue eyes are a strange combination." Alexander turned his face away. He didn't need to be told that it was strange. He knew. He'd always known. The boys he grew up with made it very clear that his half-Sorvanite heritage made him a metaphorical black sheep in their community. Anyway, Dmitri said, and Alexander was thankful he was returning to the original topic. The second way you can tell them apart is by watching how they walk. Varians have incredible posture. Dmitri punctuated his statement with a prideful laugh. Straightening up, Alexander scanned the people around them, trying to see if he could notice a difference in the way they were walking. He could tell that some of them were a little more slouched than others, and he wondered if that really was a defining factor for those not native to Varia. His own posture wasn't the greatest, he knew, but if improving it would help him blend in, he would commit to it. As he was people-watching, Alexander spotted a young boy carrying a massive smoked fish, nearly half his size. He was pushing past the line of people, heading straight for the gate. Several people behind him sent the child confused stares and began to whisper amongst themselves, but it was Dmitri who finally made a move to stop him. As the child walked past them, he caught him by the shoulders and pulled him backwards. "Hey, kid, where are you going? You gotta wait in line." The boy turned around, his dark brown mess of curly hair swishing down into his face. Alexander caught his gaze and could not look away. He suddenly felt as though he were looking into the eyes of an ancient being. The emerald green eyes of the child were sunken and hollow, yet at the same time filled with immeasurable knowledge. Alexander shivered. "Oh, sorry," the boy replied in traveler's tongue. He took a bite of his smoked fish and walked behind them without another word, heading towards the back of the line. Even Dmitri seemed shaken. "Well," he said after a few moments of stunned silence, "that one was not Varian." "Really?" Alexander said, lacing his tone with sarcasm to cover up how unnerved he was. "What gave it away?" "It gave me the creeps," Dmitri muttered as he shifted forward in the line. "I wonder who that kid is." Alexander didn't respond, and apparently Dmitri was so caught up in thinking about the strange boy, he didn't feel the need to speak to Alexander until they finally reached the city's gate. A tall guard with a bewildered expression on his face ushered them forward. Alexander wondered if it was a particularly busy day, or if it was this man's first day on the job. Either way, the poor man looked stressed out. "Are you two natives or travelers?" the guard asked, and already Alexander thought he was more pleasant than the woman who had admitted him onto the ship in Velharth. He also noticed that the guard spoke in the traveler's tongue, which wouldn't have stood out to Alexander as much if he hadn't realized at that moment that everyone else had been speaking traveler's tongue. He was now aware that the people behind him, who he had assumed to be natives of Varia, based on Dimitri's standards, had been speaking in traveler's tongue this entire time. Dmitri presented a golden token, circular with ridges around the edges. There was a design pressed into it, but Alexander couldn't quite tell what the image was. "I'm a resident of Varia," Dmitri told the guard. He gestured to Alexander. "He's not, but he'd like to be." Alexander nodded, not quite knowing what to say. He was grateful for Dimitri's help. "I'll direct you over that way," the man said, pointing towards a small building attached to the wall. "Head inside the building. Someone else will help you in there." He watched as Dmitri and Alexander approached the building, and Alexander thought it was at least a good sign that they were being watched to make sure they didn't make a run for the city now that they were past the gate. Inside the building, a woman sat behind a desk, writing with a quill pen on a piece of paper. She turned her attention to Alexander, who Dmitri had pushed up to the desk as if to urge him to do something for himself. "Can I help you?" she asked, raising a blonde eyebrow over her brown eyes. Dmitri gave Alexander a little nudge in the back, which irritated him more than anything. "I can do this by myself." "I would like to become a resident of Varia." Without another word, the woman opened a drawer in the desk and pulled out a sheet of paper, placing it on the desk and sliding it across to Alexander. "I'll need you to fill this out, please," she said, handing him a pen and sliding a bottle of ink over to his side of the desk as well. Alexander turned to look at Dmitri, unable to keep a smug expression off of his face. "No paperwork, huh?" "Less paperwork than you'd have to fill out in Velharth, I'm sure," Dmitri countered with a roll of his eyes. He was right. The piece of paper, which was written in Vala, Alexander noticed, contained only 5 questions. It asked for his full name, age, native country, whether or not he intended to work, and... Alexander's grip on the quill tightened as he read the final question. "Are you capable of using magic? If yes, note your domain below." Glancing over his shoulder to make sure Dmitri wasn't watching him closely, Alexander raised a quill raised the quill over the line on which he was supposed to answer the question. He couldn't lie on an official government document, but he had no idea what the second part of the question meant, and he couldn't ask the woman with Dimitri in the room. His best guess was that domain referred to a kind of school, but he'd never been to a magic school before. Not wanting to hesitate on the question too much, Alexander eventually scrawled out, "Yes, I don't know," in Vala, hoping the woman would send the paper off to someone else who could read his language. She accepted the paper when he slid it back to her, and for a moment Alexander's heart pounded as her gaze traveled over the paper. But then her eyes turned back to him. "Very well. Here's a residence token for you." She handed him a golden token exactly like Dimitri's. "Do not lose it. The first one is free, but replacing it is extremely expensive." She didn't elaborate on it anymore, returning to the paper she was writing on before Alexander and Dimitri had come in. Thank you," Alexander said, backing out the door. He was baffled by how easy that was. Suddenly, he was a resident of Varia, and he still had his Vilharth token in his pocket. "Well, there you go, kid," Dimitri said as soon as they were outside. "Congrats! You're Varian now. How about a drink to celebrate?" He took the lead again, heading into the city streets. Alexander turned the golden token over in his hand, running his thumb over the imprinted design, a furled banner in front of a rising sun. On the banner, in the traveler's tongue, was written, Varia. He found it odd that traveler's tongue was used so often in Varia. He was about to question Dimitri about it when something caught his eye that made him stop in his tracks. In the cobblestone streets just ahead of them, amidst the crowds of people, Alexander caught a glimpse of black hair. Or at least he thought he had, but now that he was searching the crowd he couldn't see it. "Let's go to the Flying Duck," Dimitri continued, unaware that Alexander had stopped behind him. "It's close to the port. Might not have the best drinks, but it's got some of the best company you'll ever find in any tavern. Just wait till you meet Yasha. She's—" Dimitri finally noticed he was lacking his company. "Hey, kid, you coming?" Alexander honestly hadn't been listening. Yeah. "The tavern's this way," Dimitri said, leading Alexander down a wide street along which open storefronts presented wares, goods, and food of many kinds. "Try to enjoy yourself for once, kid. And hey, maybe you'll meet some other people who can use magic." "I have a question," Alexander said, forcing the conversation away from that dreaded word. He showed the golden token to Dimitri. "Why is the name of the continent written in traveler's tongue? Doesn't Varia have its own language?" Dimitri gave him an odd look. "Traveler's tongue? Never heard of that before. The word Varia on the token is written in Varian." Varian. Alexander tilted his head to the side. "Well, I'm not about to tell you what language you're speaking, but in Vilharth we call it the traveler's tongue. I learned it growing up, and the people in Zorvan learn it too. It's the language that travelers speak so they can be understood in different countries." He trailed off. "Oh, I guess Varia's people were the travelers, huh?" The blonde-haired man shrugged. "Vilharth's a proud place, and they don't like Varia, so they probably didn't want to speak and learn a language named after us. I'll bet that's what happened." Alexander couldn't argue with that, even if it was a pompous assumption. And for some reason, knowing that he'd grown up learning Varian did make him feel a bit disgusted. He couldn't say why. As they continued towards Dimitri's tavern, Alexander found himself people-watching again. He caught a glimpse of a man lighting a candle with his bare hands, and on one corner he saw a sign for a life magic clinic. Seeing that word written so clearly, be it in traveler's tongue or Varian, sent a chill down his spine. Magic really was accepted as commonplace in Varia. "Here it is." Dimitri stopped in front of a wooden tavern, tucked away in between two stone buildings. The door was wide open, allowing the sounds of music and boisterous laughter from inside to bleed onto the streets. On the front of the tavern, in red paint, were the words, Flying Duck. Alexander wrinkled his nose. Dimitri clapped him on the back. "Your drink's on me, kid," he said. "Now come on, let loose a little. You'll love Yasha. She's beautiful." Yasha was a massive, extremely muscled woman who Alexander thought might be able to tear him in half in 2 seconds. Her face was angular, her eyes narrow and lips tugged downward in a slight frown. She seemed to recognize Dimitri immediately, as soon as they entered. "Ah, if it isn't our little traveler returning home at last," Yasha said. Her low voice had a gravelly undertone that wasn't entirely unpleasant, especially since the overtone of her voice was soft. "And you made a friend, did you?" "It's great to be back, Yasha. I'm not one to get seasick, of course, but it takes a special breed of person to enjoy being on a boat for a month straight." Dimitri tilted his head towards Alexander. "This kid's a traveler from Vilharth, but he plans on living here now. Got his token of residence and everything. I'm buying drinks for the two of us before I show him the rest of the seaport sector. Yasha turned her brown eyes in Alexander's direction, scrutinizing him from behind the bar counter. You old enough to be drinking? Her voice sounded gentle, as if she were afraid to break the news to him. I'm 18, Alexander protested, though he wasn't fond of alcohol anyway, and he had a sneaking suspicion that Dmitri would try to get information out of him while he was intoxicated. But the ship kind of messed with my stomach. I'll have some water, if you don't mind. Dmitri scoffed. Water? After a trip like that? Come now, Yasha, who cares how old he is? It'll be 2 ales for us. Alexander raised his eyebrows and stared up at Yasha, hoping this large woman would understand his predicament. Sit down, she said, gesturing to the dining area. There were a few open tables left. I'll bring your drinks out when they're ready. Dmitri picked a table for the two of them, grunting as he sat down in one of the wooden chairs. Alexander followed suit, glad to finally rest his legs. When Yasha brought their drinks out to them, she placed 2 tankards of ale in the middle of the table and a smaller glass of water in front of Alexander. Figured I'd start you on some water, Yasha said to Alexander, and he thought for sure he saw her wink at him. As Dmitri started on one of the ales, and Alexander sipped his water, he finally decided to ask a question that had been weighing on his mind. Dmitri, how many people in Varia can use magic? The twinkle in Dmitri's eye was exactly why Alexander had waited this long to ask him about it. It's pretty common, he said. About 1 in every 4 people. It's randomly dispersed, not passed down through family. Some people think the gods choose which people are born with it. The gods? Alexander knew Varia had a long list of gods and goddesses they worshipped. Whether or not they actually watched over Varia, Alexander couldn't say, but he was certain they weren't present in Valehearth. Do you believe that? Dmitri shrugged. Doesn't matter to me where you get it. Magic's a weird thing. It probably just picks which people it wants to inhabit. He took another drink of ale, as if dismissing the topic entirely. After that, Alexander went back to people watching. He saw a woman dry a wet towel with a spout of air that came from her hands, and outside on the streets, he spotted a young child lift up a rock twice his size before being scolded by his parents, after which he threw the rock to the ground, where it split perfectly in 2. A frown pulled at Alexander's lips. He was suddenly homesick for a home he didn't have anymore. Are you traveling back home or away from home? He pressed his eyes closed for a moment, pushing the memory of the black-haired woman to the back of his mind. Well, I've got to head home, Alexander, Dmitri said, breaking through his thoughts in a voice slightly groggier than it had been before. Glancing over at the man, Alexander saw that he had polished off both of the ales. It's getting later than I thought, and I have to let my lovely lady know that I made it home safely. He leaned closer to Alexander. Come home with me. Stay the night. I'll show you the rest of the city tomorrow. Alexander shook his head, sickened by the thought. If he was going to find a new home, it certainly wouldn't be with Dmitri and some women he didn't know. I think I'll do a bit of exploring on my own tonight. If you'd show me to one of the common dwellings, I can make my way from there. Dmitri looked as though he were about to argue, but then a smile crossed his face. Better that Avelda and I get to spend the night alone anyway, he said, and then he stood up, returning to the counter. Alexander watched as he paid for the drinks, utterly disgusted by the man's words. He couldn't imagine staying in a house with a couple overnight. For a reason he couldn't quite explain, even the thought made him uncomfortable. Even sleeping in a common dwelling with several other people would be better than that. After all, that had been his living condition for the last 4 weeks on the ship. After leaving the Flying Duck, Dmitri was nice enough to show Alexander to the nearest common dwelling. It was located on the edge of a large square called the Eagle Eye Market. There was a board for job postings in the middle, Dmitri had explained, and he suggested Alexander start there if he was looking for something he could do for the next few days before he left the capital. Good luck, kid, Dmitri said, putting his hand on Alexander's shoulder. I'll see you around, I'm sure. Let me know if you need anything. Yasha should know where to find me. And with that, Dmitri set off, leaving Alexander completely alone. As he stared into the Eagle Eye Market, Alexander stuffed his hands into his pockets, rubbing his thumb over his Mapleton token. I made it, he realized. I made it here. Alone? I can start my new life. Stepping into the market, Alexander was simultaneously stricken with excitement and fear. This was how he wanted it, how it needed to be. He, alone, fending for himself, not relying on anyone, and with no one to rely on him.
You can just feel how exhausted he is.
Yes.
Can Yasha join the party too? Can that happen? Can Yasha join the party?
Yasha is very important in other media. I don't think she's going to be... She's not going to be that prominent in this story, but she is definitely an important part of the Varia lore.
I must see her again.
She is Danny's creation.
I'm in love with her.
I am too.
I like... Can she be my friend, please?
Could she be my friend?
You should show them the picture of Yasha.
Please.
Because we have
Give it.
actual art of Yasha.
Show the
Give
cupcake.
the art.
Yes.
I'll post it after chat. I don't want to distract from this, but I'll post
That's
it.
That's fair.
Okay.
Okay, anyway. I enjoy how much Alexander focuses on people's eye and hair color. Like, it's distracting to him almost. That he examines people specifically for those features.
Yes.
And I guess it, like Arundel said, it probably calls attention to the fact that like his eye and hair color combination is strange and makes him stand out a lot.
He got a lot of flack for it, so he kind of got trained to look for it and be conscious of it.
Which is very much something that happens.
Yeah.
As someone with a relatively unusual eye color, you see it everywhere. Like that awareness, that moment of, oh, there's another person that looks more normal than I do.
Yeah, I have the most boring eye color. I really enjoy how this... Oh, go on, Snow.
No, you go.
Oh, okay.
No, you hang up. No, you.
Yeah, I know, right?
It's fun to watch Alexander like hold Dimitri at such arm's length and be so bristly toward him, and then like the minute something like Dimitri does something nice, he's like, actually, you're my best friend. Oh, I'm so thankful you're helping me.
Yes, that's what actually very much what I was going to say. Just the transition between Alexander trying to be friendly because he thought that he would be useful to just not caring anymore and just being absolutely horribly rude and not controlling his face or anything while he's around. And as soon as I get off this boat, I'm ditching this guy to, wait, I need to know about this thing. Please tell me about this thing. And it's like, and he flips back and forth so fast. And it both denotes how tired and desperate he is, but also just says a lot about him as a person in general and just his grumpy demeanor. And it just, overall, I love it. It's very good.
It makes him feel like a teenager. It really does. Yeah, he's 18. It makes him feel like an 18-year-old.
Oh boy.
He's trying to be an adult and he's not quite there yet, and but he doesn't want to acknowledge that.
Yep.
I love,
Every time...
I mean, sorry, you go.
I was just going to say, every time he has the little crisis about, like, I don't know where my home is, I'm not sure if I should even, like, be saying back home. Like, every time he says back home, he kind of has a little crisis about, wait, is that accurate or not? I feel that so much. So,
I bet.
Yeah, that gets me good, that does. That gets me really good.
This entire book series is just a journey of Alexander finding his home. That is essentially what's happening here.
I know, knowing you, this is going to get wildly out of control very quickly.
I think that's a compliment.
But it's just, it has such a I mean, you're taking us into a world that is so different. And it feels homely and cottagey and very comfortable, like within 2 chapters, and you're comfortable with the characters and you're happy to be there. You feel, it's like that kind of excitement of coming to a new place, but it's like, it's very comforting, and it's just a really good tone to open the story on. A very good tone for that finding a home kind of story.
Awesome.
I can't wait to see how the tone also gets derailed.
Oh yes, that's going to happen for sure.
Like,
there goes the tone. I like to wave at it as it passes by.
We had a happy vibe for 5 seconds. Then Lexi happened.
That's a new record.
Yeah, it is a new record.
Have some faith in me.
Yeah.
Have some faith in me. I enjoy fluff. There will be fluff in this story.
We don't usually get in 3 second increments.
I'm just talking about the chat in general.
I'll just trust you a bit. Just a bit.
Flanked.
For the
If you've read any of the Plank Adventure prompts that I've done so far, a lot of those are fluffy.
Flanked.
Flanks.
Oh, sorry, I can't come today. I've got flanks.
Lexi, I can't wait to catch up on your
just a touch of flanked.
Yes, I can't either. I'm about to go into a huge reading sprint over the next week.
Oh my! Look at that.
What?
Oh, that's wonderful.
I love.
Oh, I love her.
I love.
So much.
This
She
is
reminds me a little bit
commissioned by
Heart.
No.
She reminds me a little bit of Azumi from Full Metal Alchemist.
Oh yeah.
Which is a very good thing to be similar to.
Yasha is very good.
You can't tell how tall she is in this, but she's I think I have
I can, and I'm intimidated.
What did I have her at? 6'11"? 6'10"?
Oh my goodness.
Wait, hang on.
I take it back. Never mind.
Absolute cupcake.
Sorry. Was it 6? Was it 6? No, it was like 6'8". Was it?
I don't remember.
It's upwards of 6.5 feet. I know that.
6'8".
How many of
seems-
me do you have to stack to make one, Yasha?
It's 2 whole sleeves.
Oh my goodness.
It's too much sweet.
Oh my goodness.
If she's 6'8",
Congratulations, Steve. You've upgraded.
If she's 6'8", I have a direct point of reference and know exactly how far up I would have to look her in the eye. I do not like it.
I think she is 6'8", if I'm remembering correctly.
I trust her. I trust her to run the tavern. I want her to protect me.
Oh yeah.
She is very protective.
Excellent.
I died.
By the way, we've just stepped off the boat, quite literally, and I already love Varia. Like, I want to explore now.
Yes, that's kind of what I was saying. It's just it just I don't know. It's amazing.
We will get to explore all over Varia.
Yeah.
You do such an amazing job of making it feel so real and so vast, and like it's just ready to be.
It feels big.
Mm-hmm.
It feels very big. I am scared.
I think what I appreciate. Oh, sorry.
No, go on.
I think what I appreciate about it is it does not feel like right off the bat. It does not feel like generic fantasy world. Like there's something inherently interesting about it that just gets you. And I can't even put my finger on what it is exactly, but the way it works interests me. Yes, and like the tokens and the kind of how stark that is from where Alexander's come from.
Yeah,
Sorry, continue.
It's your turn, Snow.
It's just I don't know. I'm having a really hard time with feedback because like the whole feel of this chapter is I'm feeling the excitement that Alexander is not to explore this place, and I cannot wait for more. And that sums up this whole chapter. It's like you're like standing on the edge, and it's a nice edge, and I want to go down there.
Throw ourselves into the void.
One thing I really...
Oh, Arundel's got a question.
Do you want to answer the question, Jenny?
Oh, yes, I can answer the question. Sorry. It's really cool because we kind of, like, the way that I run a D&D game is by running it around the choices that the players make. And so having Lexi be playing Alexander in my game for 4 years, this world has grown around him and the other player characters. And so I really feel like it's 100% both of ours in a way. Like, I don't consider it mine because it is such a shared experience that we built it.
Roleplays can be like that. Yeah, it's collaborative for a reason, and it makes you a very good DM, I think, if you build it with your friends.
She is a very good DM.
I can't do the
Good DM.
Murder. There is one good way to murder everyone in this chat, and this is a
Compliments.
sincere compliment.
Yes.
Take the compliment.
Take it.
Haha.
Take it.
Feel
Take the
my-
power of my love.
One detail I really liked about the world building was the change in language labeling, basically, for Alexander, where he was like, this is Traveler's Tongue, and Dimitri's like, no, this is Varian. They probably call
This
it
is
Traveler's
straight
Tongue.
up like the native language.
They probably call it Traveler's Tongue because they don't want to acknowledge Varia, and Alexander's like, that can't be the reason. It totally is the reason.
Yeah.
It's just really fun to see these different like opinions between the countries, and it gets you established between the culture clash right away, so you feel how lost
Yeah.
Alexander is in Cowboy Land.
Cowboy Land.
Yes,
You
that's
fill
the
out
feel
5
it has is
questions.
Cowboy Land.
To become a resident. They're like, oh yeah,
Oh
okay,
my
you can be a
goodness.
resident if you want. Just give us your name, telephone number.
He's like, what is this? Where's the background check?
There is no background. This is the background check. Dimitri was your background check.
I mean, to be fair, they just like kick these people out into the wilderness beyond the main city by the sound of it. So it's like, okay, you can go hang out in the woods.
Yeah, basically.
See you later if you come back.
Yeah, if not, no big deal. Just, see ya.
There's gotta be other coastal towns in this giant continent that is the biggest one in the world. There just has to be.
I also feel
Poor
that the
Alexander.
fact that it's very hard to get a job in that city might be because of this lax security. Like, nobody wants to hire the
You've got
people just
so
off
many
the
people
boat.
coming in.
And you've got so many people in, you've got people coming off the boat. It's just like they keep the jobs that are like stable and continuous for people who they want to keep there. So unless you're a resident, there's like an inner circle. They basically, they're just streamlined to flush these newcomers out because they have no other defense against it, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Dimitri doing vibe checks. Dimitri is a vibe check.
Dimitri has very vibes.
Dimitri,
I-
Dimitri tests if you can take psychic damage or not.
Oh, my goodness. Dimitri
Yeah.
is a person I would like to watch from a distance. I would just like to watch the chaos unfold and never actually interact.
yeah, just see what he's up to.
Just put him in a zoo exhibit and watch him like.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Observe him checking vibes.
See, I wish I could take these comments on Dimitri and give them to the person who played Dimitri in the campaign. That's true, it is being recorded.
Yeah,
just
you're
showed-
recorded.
show the
Pass
recording.
on.
Ryan would love to hear that.
He would.
The fact that all of us immediately looked at Dimitri and went,
I
Unfortunately,
mean, you
I love
think
it.
a very extroverted dude in the server full of extra introverts.
yeah. Well,
Well, that's fair. Maybe not all of us, but
I'm a bit more
To
of an
be fair-
extrovert than an introvert.
yeah, to be fair, I'm an extrovert with severe social anxiety. So
Yeah, that's the
the
move.
curse.
it is
It is curse.
I'm extroverted with the capacity limit of one person, maybe two.
Yeah.
Except for
I'm an
very
introvert
Saturday,
who
Sunday.
really likes people.
So the opposite curse.
Yeah.
You
Rip.
have the map?
In illustration.
Yeah.
Oh, it's so good.
Oh, I want to see the map.
Ooh.
Where's the cat? Oh, there it is. I see the capital.
There we go.
I just
Looking
love
good.
maps so much.
Oh, here he comes. Here comes the map.
Making the map more than happy.
Like, you don't understand. I just stare at maps like hours. I love them. Make maps constantly.
I should make a map.
You might recognize some other names on there, depending on
You should make a globe. Make a
how
globe.
much you've heard me talk.
Yeah, make Snow's extra globe.
Yeah, make a globe.
The globe of extraness.
We definitely should.
I'm not that detailed. I can't do that.
the globe of extra.
Oh boy.
That's yeah.
Increase the dimensions of extra.
It's actually really, really useful. I can actually look at that thing and be like, this person's from here, the other person's from there. It's 3 days from here to here. And it's actually a very useful tool.
Oh
So-
no! Am I really going to make a map with sea levels and everything?
Yes.
Oh, I felt that.
Oh, I tell you.
So yes, unless there are any thoughts or comments for Lexi, we will jump to mine, which is pretty short. So,
away,
Sam.
Sam, yes.